Some betrayals don't come with warning signs. They don't whisper in the dark, don't leave traces of doubt lingering in your mind. Some betrayals walk straight through the front door, wearing expensive perfume and a dress you've never seen before, looking you in the eye with the smugness of someone who thinks they've already won. That was Vanessa Holt, my wife of 15 years, the woman I had built a life with, the woman I had once trusted more than anyone. She leaned against the doorway of our kitchen, heels clicking against the marble floor. The black dress she wore, tight, elegant, but far too revealing for a business dinner, clung to her body in a way that made it painfully clear she wasn't dressing for me anymore. "Don't wait up, Alex," she said, her voice light, almost playful. "I'm going out with my lover tonight." I paused mid-motion, the knife in my hand hovering over the cutting board. The scent of rosemary and seared salmon filled the air, a meal I had been preparing for the woman who now stood in front of me with zero remorse. I turned my head slightly, taking her in. The way she smirked, the way she tilted her chin, as if waiting for me to break down. She wanted a reaction. She wanted me to yell, to beg. Instead, I set the knife down with deliberate care and wiped my hands on a kitchen towel. "Who is he?" I asked, my voice controlled. She smiled, like this was some kind of game. "Diego Moro." A pause. Then, with an extra dose of cruelty. "And before you ask, yes, I've been sleeping with him for months." A lesser man might have felt rage, might have thrown something, screamed, lost control. But I wasn't a lesser man. I had seen the signs long before she thought I had. The late-night showers. The way she started wearing perfume to bed, not for me, but for him. The sudden business trips that left her coming home with hotel shampoo in her hair. I had known, and instead of confronting her, I had prepared. "I see," I said simply. Vanessa sighed as if I was the one being difficult. "Look, Alex, don't make this a big thing. You had to have seen this coming." I tilted my head. "Did I?" She crossed her arms, shifting her weight to one hip. "Come on. You and I, we haven't been us for a long time." I got tired of pretending. Something twisted inside me. Not rage, not jealousy, just a quiet, aching sadness. I had tried to hold on to us. I had tried to fix what was breaking between us. But love, no matter how strong, can't survive when only one person is fighting for it. Vanessa had stopped fighting a long time ago. "Do you love him?" I asked, though I wasn't sure I wanted to know the answer. She hesitated, just for a second, and in that moment, I saw it. Doubt. Guilt. The smallest flicker of something real. Then, just as quickly, it was gone. "I don't know. But I know I don't love you the way I used to." The final blow. I nodded, pressing my lips together, letting the silence stretch between us. She shifted, uncomfortable now, because I wasn't reacting the way she had expected. I wasn't begging. I wasn't angry. I was just letting go. "You deserve to be happy, Vanessa," I said quietly. Relief flickered in her eyes, as if she thought this was going to be easy. "But walk out that door tonight," I continued, "and everything changes." Her brows furrowed. "What do you mean?" "I mean, you leave as my wife," I said, "but you won't come back as one." She scoffed, rolling her eyes. "Oh, please, Alex. We both know you won't actually do anything." She stepped closer, trailing a manicured nail down my chest. "You need me. Who else would put up with your rigid schedules? Your workaholic habits? Your need for control?" She leaned in, voice dropping. "Diego knows how to handle a woman like me. He knows what I need." I swallowed the bitterness rising in my throat. She thought she still had power over me. "You're right about one thing," I said. She smirked. "Oh." I stepped back, out of her reach. "I won't do anything." For the first time, her confidence wavered. "What does that mean?" she asked. I checked my watch. "You should go. Wouldn't want to keep Diego waiting." She hesitated, just for a second, before scoffing. "Whatever, Alex." She grabbed her purse from the counter and turned toward the door. My voice stopped her. "Vanessa." She turned, annoyed. "What?" I met her gaze, calm, steady, unreadable. "You'll regret this." She laughed, sharp and mocking. "You think I'll regret leaving a boring, predictable man for someone who actually makes me feel something?" The door opened, The door closed. The sound echoed through the penthouse, leaving behind silence. I exhaled, rubbing a hand over my face. My chest felt tight, not with anger, not with pain, but with finality. I had already lost her long before tonight, and now it was time to accept it. I reached for my phone and dialed. The line rang twice before Ethan Graves, my head of security, answered. Mr. Colt. Execute Plan Omega, I said, my voice steady. Understood, came the swift response. Shall I contact Pierce as well? Yes. Everything goes into motion tonight. As I ended the call, I turned back to my dinner. I wasn't angry. I wasn't heartbroken. I was just done. Vanessa thought she had outplayed me. She had no idea she was already checkmated. The apartment felt different without her. It wasn't just the silence. It was something deeper, something that settled in the air like an old ghost. Vanessa had been the heartbeat of this place for 15 years, and now she was gone. But it wasn't her absence that made the air feel lighter. It was the certainty that she wouldn't be coming back. I stood in the kitchen, hands resting on the marble countertop, staring at the plate of food I never got to finish. The salmon had gone cold, the vegetables untouched. Funny how quickly things could change. A door closed, a decision was made, and suddenly, an entire life unraveled. My phone buzzed. A message from Ethan Graves. All steps initiated. Surveillance active. Wilkins is in position. I exhaled. Good. Vanessa had spent months believing she was in control. That ended tonight. Vanessa came home late. She walked through the front door at 1:42 a.m., her heels clicking against the floor, her dress slightly wrinkled, her lipstick smudged at the edges. I was waiting. She froze when she saw me, sitting at the kitchen table, divorce papers neatly stacked in front of me. She blinked, like she was struggling to understand the situation. Alex, why are you still up? She asked cautiously. I didn't answer. Instead, I gestured to the chair across from me. Sit. Something in my tone made her hesitate. Alex, look. Sit, I repeated. For the first time, uncertainty flickered in her eyes. Slowly, she stepped forward, slipping into the chair. She glanced at the papers, then back at me. What's this? You know what it is, I said. She swallowed. You're serious? Dead serious. Her lips parted, but no words came. I had never been the impulsive type, never been the man who acted without thinking. She had counted on that. She had assumed I would need time, that I would be too heartbroken to make a move. She had underestimated me. Alex, she said, forcing a breathless laugh. Don't you think this is a bit dramatic? I mean, come on. We don't need to do this right now. You're right, I said. I should have done this months ago. Her face fell. She reached for the papers, flipping through the pages, her fingers shaking slightly. Then she got to the financial section, and everything changed. Her brows furrowed. Then, panic. Wait, where's my name? She muttered, scanning the documents. It's not there, I said calmly. She looked up at me, her breath catching. No, this doesn't make sense. The accounts are all in my name, I finished. She shook her head. No, that's not possible. Our assets are joint. I have access to... Not anymore, I said. Her mouth opened, closed, opened again. It was starting to sink in. For months, Vanessa had been moving in secret, planning her escape, believing she had the upper hand. She had thought I was too blind to notice. She had no idea that while she had been plotting to leave me, I had been preparing to leave her with nothing. Her breathing was uneven now. You can't just do this. You can't just take everything. I tilted my head. Funny, that's what you were planning to do to me. She went still. A long silence stretched between us. Then, quietly, she asked, How long have you known? 3 months. Her lips trembled. You never said anything? I leaned back in my chair. I wanted to see how far you'd take it. If there was even a sliver of guilt, of hesitation. I let that sink in before adding, there wasn't. Tears welled in her eyes. But I knew better. She wasn't crying because she regretted what she had done. She was crying because she had been caught. Alex, listen. No, Vanessa, I interrupted, my voice steady. You listen. I leaned forward, resting my arms on the table. You walked out that door tonight thinking you were untouchable, I said. Thinking you could have it all, the affair, the money, the comfort of knowing I'd still be waiting for you. I shook my head. You were wrong. She exhaled sharply, shaking her head. This isn't fair. I let out a short laugh. Fair? She flinched. Fair would have been ending our marriage before you started sleeping with someone else, I continued. Fair would have been talking to me instead of sneaking around behind my back. She wiped at her eyes. Alex, please. I don't want to fight. I held her gaze. There is no fight, Vanessa. Her breath hitched. You already lost. Her fingers trembled as she reached for her phone. I knew what she was about to do before she did it. Go ahead, I said. Try to log in. She hesitated. Then, with shaking hands, she opened her banking app. A few seconds later, her entire world crumbled. She tried again. Error. Her mouth parted slightly, a choked sound escaping her throat. She switched to her email, scrolling through unread messages. Her expression grew more panicked with each one. She checked her texts. She scrolled frantically, her breath coming faster. Her fingers hovered over Diego's name. Then, she saw his last message. Vanessa, what the hell is happening? My accounts are frozen. My properties are under review. You said this wouldn't happen. Call me. Her hands started shaking. Her gaze snapped back to me, her face pale, broken. You. Her voice barely worked. You planned this. I nodded. For months. She stared at me, her breathing uneven. But why? She whispered. Because, Vanessa, I said, standing up, I was never going to let you walk away with my life. I picked up my coffee cup, taking a slow sip. She just sat there, staring at the phone in her hand like it was a foreign object, like it no longer connected her to the future she thought she had. She had spent months believing she was in control. Now, for the first time, she realized she had none. And as I turned toward the hallway, leaving her alone at the kitchen table, I knew this was only the beginning. I sat in my office, the soft hum of the city beyond the glass. The penthouse was quieter than it had been in years. No lingering scent of Vanessa's perfume. No idle chatter about meaningless things. Just silence. And I liked it. My phone buzzed. Ethan Graves. She's home. Just read the papers. Tried to access the accounts. Failed. I leaned back in my chair, fingers tapping lightly against the wooden surface. Right on schedule. I didn't need to be there to see it. Vanessa sitting at the kitchen table, eyes narrowing as she refreshed her banking app. The realization hitting her like a freight train. Everything she had planned. The new life. The new man. The perfect future where she walked away with everything. Gone. I let the moment sink in. Then I replied. Keep watching. An hour later, Ethan sent another update. She's trying to call Moreau. No answer. A small smile tugged at my lips. Diego Moreau. The man she deserved. The one she thought would be her future. I had timed the investigation perfectly. Moreau's assets were already under review. His bank accounts had been flagged for suspicious activity. By the time Vanessa called him, he was already drowning. And she? She was realizing she had no lifeline. 2 more hours passed. Ethan checked in again. She's contacted multiple friends. None responded. That part wasn't even my doing. Vanessa had spent years surrounding herself with people who admired her status. The glamorous wife. The woman who had everything. But once she had nothing, they dropped her without hesitation. I scrolled through Clara Vaughn's report. Lauren, Alyssa, Nina, all ignored her. Not because I told them to, but because nobody wants to be associated with someone who's been exposed as a liar and a cheater. They saw the recordings. They heard her own voice, cold, calculated, cruel, and they made their decision. She was on her own. And now, she finally understood what that meant. By midnight, Ethan sent the final update. She got the recordings. I exhaled slowly, letting the weight of those words settle. I pulled up my phone and scrolled to the files. I didn't need to listen. I already knew what they contained. Poor Alex. So predictable. So easy to manipulate. He actually thinks I love him. That's the funniest part. Once we drain him dry, Diego and I will be set for life. And Alex? He won't even see it coming. Vanessa had laughed when she said those words, mocked me, ridiculed me. And now? That same voice was probably shaking as she replayed it over and over, knowing that everyone she once valued had heard it too. She wasn't just broke. She was ruined. A knock on the door. Ethan stepped inside. She tried calling Diego again, he said. Straight to voicemail. I took a slow sip of my drink. And Moreau? Ethan's expression darkened. Still in his office. Last report says he's been making calls all night. He hesitated. Unstable. Good. The fraud investigation had started earlier that day. His name was all over the financial news. His accounts? Frozen. His investors? Pulling out. By morning, Moreau would understand what it felt like to lose everything in an instant. Just like he had planned for me. I checked my watch. 1:30 a.m. Vanessa was still inside the penthouse. I imagined her sitting at the table, her hands gripping her phone, calling, texting, desperate. For months, she had lived in the fantasy that she controlled everything, that I was too weak, too blind, too predictable to fight back. Now, she was trapped in a life that no longer belonged to her. Her bank accounts were closed. Her lover was gone. Her friends had turned their backs. Her kingdom had crumbled. And there was nothing she could do. I stood, stretching slightly. Make sure she's out by tomorrow morning. Ethan nodded. And if she refuses? I met his gaze, my voice calm. She won't. Because for the first time in her life, Vanessa had no other choice. By morning, she was gone. Ethan's message arrived at 6:42 a.m. Vanessa left the penthouse. Took a single suitcase. Nothing else. I set my coffee down, staring out at the skyline. I had imagined this moment so many times. I had thought it would bring satisfaction. The final proof that she was nothing without me, that she had gambled and lost. But as I stood in the quiet emptiness of my home, I felt something else entirely. Not relief. Not happiness. Just a strange, hollow silence. I exhaled slowly. This was necessary. She had made her choice. Now, she had to live with it. By noon, Clara sent her first update. Vanessa is at her mother's house. No money, no car. Tried reaching out to friends. Ignored. I leaned back in my chair, rubbing a hand across my jaw. Her mother's house. The one she had spent years pretending didn't exist. I remembered how she used to talk about it. I love my mother, but I could never live that life, Alex. I need more. And now? She was back where she started. Not in Diego's arms. Not in a luxury suite, laughing over champagne. Just home. The irony tasted bitter on my tongue. Later that afternoon, Clara sent another report. She's looking for work. No success? I wasn't surprised. For 15 years, she had been the perfect wife. Elegant, poised, skilled at making dinner conversation, but useless in a world that demanded more than charm. She had never needed to work. Never had to sit through an interview, write a resume, learn a skill. Her job had been being my wife. Now, without that title, she was nothing. She had tried a few places, a cafe, a boutique, a bookstore. At each one, she had been greeted with polite smiles, then rejected. Not because people knew her, not because of the scandal, but because she had nothing to offer. I let the thought settle. For the first time, there was no safety net, and Vanessa had no idea how to land on her feet. That evening, I found myself staring at an old photo, one from before everything fell apart. It was us at a New Year's Eve party. She was laughing, her head tilted back slightly, her hand on my chest. She had looked at me like I was her entire world. Had it been real? Or had I just been convenient until something better came along? I set the photo down. It didn't matter now. Meanwhile, across the city, Diego Moreau was falling apart. His fraud case had made headlines. His business was on the verge of collapse. His bank accounts? Frozen. His investors? Gone. I had barely done anything. He had destroyed himself. Clara sent me a copy of an email Moreau had sent to an old business partner. I need funds. I need help. Alex Holt destroyed me. I just need one chance to fix this. I let out a quiet, humorless laugh. He still didn't get it. He had spent months planning how to take everything from me. Now, He was the one begging for scraps. A few days passed. I told myself I wouldn't check in on Vanessa again. But when Clara's next report arrived, I opened it anyway. Vanessa called you 14 times in the last 2 days. No voicemail. Just silence. I stared at the message for a long time. 14 times. Not anger. Not manipulation. Just desperation. I imagined her sitting on the couch in her mother's tiny living room, gripping her phone, staring at the screen, hoping, praying that I would pick up. I wondered if she had rehearsed what she would say. Would she apologize? Would she pretend none of it had happened? Would she say she missed me? I didn't know, and I never would, because I didn't pick up. That man, the one who would have forgiven her, who would have tried to fix what was broken, didn't exist anymore. A week later, Clara called with an update I had already predicted. Diego is gone, she said. I didn't react. Gone? Vanished. Left the country. There's a warrant out for him, but he slipped through before it was filed. I let out a breath. Of course he had. Moreau was a runner. And Vanessa? She had bet everything on a man who never planned to stay. She had been so sure she was trading up. Instead, she had been discarded like an old accessory. And now? She was completely, utterly alone. That night, I stood on my balcony, the wind cool against my skin. Ethan stepped beside me. She showed up at your office today. I turned slightly. Vanessa? He nodded. Waited in the lobby for hours. Your secretary said she refused to leave until she saw you. I looked back out over the skyline. And she eventually left. Looked lost. Lost. Not angry. Not furious at being outplayed. Just lost. For the first time, I felt something other than indifference. Not regret. Not longing. Just a quiet understanding. Vanessa had spent years believing she was untouchable. Now, she was a woman without an identity, without a future, without anything to hold on to. I exhaled slowly. She won't come back, I said. And I meant it. Because Vanessa only ran toward power, never away from it. And now, she had nowhere left to run. Ethan hesitated. Do you want me to keep monitoring her? I thought about it for a long moment. Then, I shook my head. No. I was done watching. Done waiting for the final blow. She wasn't my wife anymore. She wasn't my problem anymore. I finished my drink and walked inside. For the first time in 15 years, I was free. And that, more than anything, was enough. A week had passed. 1 week since Vanessa left the penthouse with nothing but a suitcase. 1 week since Diego disappeared without a trace. 1 week since I told Ethan to block her number, delete her messages, and stop sending reports. I was done watching her downfall, but that didn't mean she was done trying to reach me. I arrived at my office early that morning, the familiar scent of fresh coffee filling the air. Melissa, my secretary, gave me a hesitant look. She came again, she said. I didn't need to ask who. Vanessa. For the third time in 5 days. Melissa hesitated before continuing. She waited in the lobby for over an hour. Didn't say much. Just sat there. Eventually, security had to ask her to leave. I exhaled slowly, setting my briefcase down. She looked different, Melissa added, almost carefully, not like before. I glanced up. How? Melissa hesitated. Smaller, like she didn't know where else to go. For a moment, I felt something tighten in my chest. Not regret, not longing, just recognition. I had seen that same lost expression before, but not on Vanessa. I had seen it in the mirror, the night I first realized she was cheating, the night I sat in the dark, trying to understand why the woman I loved had chosen someone else. I had moved past it. Vanessa, it seemed, had not. I didn't reply to her messages, didn't acknowledge the calls, didn't respond when she sent a single, quiet email. Can we talk? I stared at the words on the screen, then closed the laptop. There was nothing left to say. That evening, I met Ethan for dinner at a private club. As we settled into our seats, he gave me an unreadable look. She's still trying to see you, he said. I took a sip of my whiskey. I know. You're not curious? I set the glass down. Curious about what? Ethan shrugged. Why she's still here. That made me pause. Vanessa had options, even now, After losing everything, she could have gone to another city, found someone new, but she hadn't. She was still here, still searching for something, still waiting. A few days later, I was walking through the lobby of my office when I heard her voice. Alex. I turned. She was standing near the entrance, arms wrapped around herself. She looked different. Her hair was pulled into a simple ponytail. The flawless makeup, the designer clothes, the jewelry, all gone. For the first time in years, she looked normal. And for the first time, I realized I barely recognized her. We stood in silence for a moment. Then she spoke. Can we talk? I don't know why I agreed. Maybe because I wanted to see if she had changed. Maybe because a part of me needed closure. Or maybe because, despite everything, I still wanted to understand how we had ended up here. We sat in a quiet cafe a few blocks from my office. She stirred her coffee, eyes fixed on the table. I don't know where to start, she admitted softly. I waited. I was stupid, she finally said. I thought I had it all figured out. I thought Diego was. Her voice broke off. I didn't fill the silence for her. She let out a bitter laugh. I bet you already knew he left. I nodded. I did. She shook her head. I should have seen it coming. She wasn't crying. She wasn't pleading. She wasn't making excuses. She was just speaking. Raw. Unfiltered. Honest. And it was the first real conversation we had in years. I thought you didn't love me anymore, she admitted. I frowned. Why? Because you stopped trying. I exhaled slowly. Vanessa, I tried for years. But you were already gone before I even knew what was happening. She swallowed hard. Why did you do it? I finally asked. She looked down. I don't know. Bullshit, I said quietly. She flinched. I leaned forward. You don't destroy a marriage for no reason. You made a choice, Vanessa. I want to know why. She let out a slow breath. I wanted more, she admitted. Not more money. Not more power. Just more. I felt stuck. I wanted to feel alive again. I studied her. She wasn't lying. But she wasn't telling the whole truth either. And now? I asked. She smiled weakly. Now, I just want to survive. For the first time, I saw it. Not the woman who cheated on me. Not the person who betrayed me. Just Vanessa. A woman who had made terrible choices. A woman who had lost everything. A woman who was finally paying the price for her own actions. And for the first time, I didn't feel anger. I just felt tired. When we stepped outside, she hesitated. Would you ever forgive me? She asked. The wind was cold against my skin. I don't hate you, I said honestly. Her shoulders tensed. But that doesn't mean I can forget. She nodded slowly, looking down. I'm sorry, Alex. I believed her. But it didn't change anything. She finally exhaled, as if accepting the weight of reality. Goodbye, Alex. She turned and walked away. And this time, I didn't watch her go. I simply turned and walked in the other direction. Because the past was finally over. A month had passed. 30 days since I last saw Vanessa. 30 days since we sat across from each other in that cafe. Two people who had once built a life together. Now nothing more than strangers with shared memories. She hadn't called. Hadn't emailed again. Hadn't tried to see me. For the first time in a long time, I wasn't waiting. The mornings felt different now. For years, I had woken up next to someone, even in the final months when our marriage had become nothing more than a carefully maintained illusion. Some mornings, I could still feel the ghost of her beside me. Not out of love. Not out of longing. Just out of habit. A life spent next to someone doesn't just disappear overnight. But today, I woke up and felt something new. Not relief. Not happiness. Just peace. I stood on the balcony of my hotel suite, watching the city awaken beneath me. New York had been my battlefield for years. The place where I built my empire, lost my marriage, and found my strength. But it wasn't home anymore. It hadn't been for a long time. By sunset, I'd be on a plane. And by tomorrow morning, I'd be somewhere new. Somewhere that didn't remind me of her. Ethan knocked on the glass door and stepped onto the balcony. The last document just went through, he said. The penthouse sale is finalized. I turned toward him. Any issues? He shook his head. The new owners move in next week. I exhaled. That place had been our home, the site of our happiest memories, the battlefield of our worst fights. And now, it was someone else's story to write. A clean slate. You sure about this? Ethan asked. I gave him a small smirk. If I stay, you'll think I changed my mind? He chuckled. I just want to know you're doing this for yourself, not to run from her. I considered that. For a long time, running felt like the only option. Running from her, from the past, from everything I didn't want to deal with. But this wasn't running. This was choosing myself. No, I said. I'm not leaving anything behind. I'm just starting over. The flight to Florence, Italy was long, but for once, I didn't spend it thinking about Vanessa. I wasn't replaying old conversations. I wasn't wondering if things could have been different. I was simply looking forward. The villa was smaller than the penthouse, but it felt right. Not a statement, not a symbol of power, just a home. A place where I didn't have to prove anything, where I didn't have to pretend, where I could finally breathe. A few weeks passed. I settled in. I learned to enjoy the quiet, to sit with myself in ways I never had before, to wake up without checking my phone for messages from lawyers, from Clara, from Vanessa. I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't waiting for some grand moment of justice, because justice had already come, not in revenge, not in humiliation, but in the simple passage of time. And time had taken care of everything. One afternoon, I was sitting in a quiet cafe in the heart of Florence when my phone buzzed with an email. From Clara. I hesitated. Then, curiosity won. I opened it. Vanessa left the city. No contact with anyone. Last known location, Chicago. No reports of her trying to reach you. That was it. No dramatic goodbye. No desperate attempt to come back. Just a woman trying to disappear. I stared at the screen for a long moment. Not because I wanted her back. Not because I missed her. But because, for the first time, I felt something close to understanding. She wasn't chasing old dreams anymore. She wasn't trying to fix what was broken. She was just moving on. And somehow, I respected that. That night, as I walked through the quiet streets, the scent of fresh bread and strong coffee filling the air, I thought about everything that had happened. Everything I had lost. Everything I had learned. For so long, I had let my past define me. I had let anger drive me. I had let pain control me. But I didn't need that anymore. Because what was ahead of me mattered more than what was behind. And I was finally ready to let go. That evening, as the sun set over the hills, I stood on my terrace with a glass of wine, watching the golden light fade into the horizon. I thought about the past. Not with pain. Not with anger. Just acceptance. Vanessa had made her choices. And so had I. But I wasn't bitter. I wasn't waiting for karma to find her. I wasn't hoping for some final twist of fate that would prove I had won. Because the truth was, I had already won. Not by destroying her. Not by punishing her. But by simply letting go. That was the real victory. Not revenge. Not power. Just peace. And that was something she could never take from me.